Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Monday morning, talking 7 games around the NBA. Before we dive into the slate, please remember, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way you get notified whenever I post a brand new video. Also, if you like the content that I am pushing out, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. It goes a long way to helping me produce more content. My Twitter handle, at BrentHyden1, is in the description down below. If you're not already following me on Twitter, please make sure to head over to the Twitter machine, hit that follow button, and while you're over there, send me a direct message to find out how you can get access to my daily content, projections, Discord channel, and all that good stuff for a very affordable price. Without further ado, let's head into the slate. First game of the night that we are going to talk about, Oklahoma City at Detroit. Not a terribly appealing game, if I'm being completely honest. Oklahoma City favored by 220.5 over under. Pistons looked good, looked really good against the Warriors over the weekend. A lot of their success has come with their second unit, and that has been led by Stanley Johnson coming off the bench, averaging 9.9 points per game and 23.6 minutes off the bench. Andre Drummond has been absolutely crushing as well. Dropped a double-double. It's his 17th over the first 20 games. He's averaging 18.6 and 16.4 rebounds per game. Drummond playing really, really well. But looking at the Oklahoma City side of things, obviously Russell Westbrook is a perfectly fine option in this game. 31% usage rate on the season, a little bit down compared to where we're used to seeing him, but still really solid numbers. Gets a good matchup against the Detroit team that ranks 23rd in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. Detroit lacking rim protection. They're allowing opponents to shoot 69% at the rim. He takes 45% of his shots at the rim. So Russell Westbrook sitting at 11-2 is a perfectly fine option if you're paying up for somebody and you're not looking at like Harden or Durant or someone like that tonight. Perfectly fine with Russell Westbrook. Given Detroit's issues at the rim and the fact that they're giving up 50 points in the paint per game, Steven Adams, very, very appealing in the spot. A little pricey, 6,400 on DraftKings, 7,300 on FanDuel, but I do like Steven Adams in all formats. More of a cash play for me, but still someone that you can look at. Detroit ranking 25th in defensive efficiency to centers on the season. We can also look at Paul George if you wish. 8,500 is pretty appealing for him. Most nights, whenever he plays full minutes, you feel pretty confident that given his rebounding and his block steals numbers that he's going to be able to get you 40 plus fantasy points, and that's pretty appealing, especially in cash games at 8,500 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. Never going to return really, really high value, but you're paying for a pretty high floor with Paul George, so I'm fine with him if you're building cash lineups and head-to-head lineups and things like that. You can look at Jeremy Grant as well, someone that projects to be a decently solid cash game play as well. Always just going to be a guy that I look at in cash. And then Dennis Schroeder, someone that we can also look at with OKC potentially being shorthanded, with Diallo being questionable and Terrence Ferguson probably not going to suit up for this one. Dennis Schroeder, someone that we can consider as well. Should play high 20s, coming close to that 30-minute mark tonight. So Dennis Schroeder, someone that you can look at as a mid-range option. On the Detroit side of this, it's not really a spot that I want to attack too much. We are looking at Blake Griffin, of course, leading the team in usage. Blake Griffin has a 28.8% usage rate. Andre Drummond second in the team in usage at 24.9%. Neither guy is just really, really appealing in the spot. I think there's better places to spend the salary. 8,800 on DraftKings for Blake Griffin is somewhat appealing in tournaments. 9,200 on FanDuel, I guess, is okay in tournaments. Andre Drummond at 10K on FanDuel. I just don't really want to go there tonight. There's better center options on the slate. Reggie Jackson, it is a revenge game, so if you're into that kind of thing, he's fine in tournaments. Oklahoma City is giving up 44% shooting in the paint, where he shoots 26% of his shots, so I'm fine with Reggie Jackson. Stanley Johnson, I mentioned in the opener. On DraftKings, 3,700. I'm fine with that in tournaments. On FanDuel, that's a hard pass. Like, I'm not paying 5K for him, but he's been playing really, really well recently, especially off the bench. I've been hitting on him a little bit recently in that Golden State game and in that Knicks game, and it paid off both of those spots. So he's fine in tournaments if you're looking for a value, non-chalk value option here. Looking at the next game, Golden State at Atlanta. Golden State 10.5-point favorites, 232 over under in this one. Lots to talk about here. We have a lot of injuries. Draymond Green is out. Alfonso McKinney is out. Alex Poythress is out. Damian Jones is out. Dwayne Dedmon is probable, and Jeremy Lin is probable in this one. Looking at the Golden State side of things, it's a great spot for them. They project to be really, really, really good plays pretty much across the board with all of them. Looking at the projections for today, we have Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, both projecting really, really solid plays. Curry ranks out just a little bit higher on DraftKings than Kevin Durant. Durant a little bit higher on FanDuel than Stephen Curry. We have Klay Thompson grading out pretty well, and then we have Jordan Bell, Jonas Jerebko, Kevon Looney, guys that do grade out pretty well in the spot as well. As far as where I'm looking tonight, with Draymond, McKinney, and Jones all being off the floor, Kevin Durant 40.2% usage rate, 1.60 fantasy points per minute in 264 minutes. Stephen Curry only an 81 minute sample size, 47.4% usage rate, 1.39 fantasy points per minute. Those two guys dominating usage, but even Klay Thompson 33% usage rate, just under a fantasy point per minute. With those guys off the floor. The Hawks absolutely atrocious defending the three-point line. Yeah, they're allowing opponents to shoot 37.6% on three-pointers. I love Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson in this spot. Curry did not shoot very well in his first game back. Scored 27 points on 10-21 shooting. So, I mean, I guess that's still pretty well, but I guess by Curry standards, not as well as you would expect. But I really, really, really like him in this spot. I expect him to be in rhythm a little bit more, and in a matchup against an Atlanta team that is just atrocious against point guards. I love Stephen Curry at 9,500 on DraftKings, 9,700 on FanDuel. I will be trying to pay up for a couple of point guards in this spot tonight. So Stephen Curry, one of those guys. Even if you expect this game to blow out, like I think Stephen Curry is someone that we can definitely consider. In the spot, I do like Durant, but I think I'm going to be looking elsewhere tonight with guys like Klay Thompson. 7,400 for Klay Thompson. It is a very appealing spot for him. He looked really good against the Pistons again, 10 of 20 from the floor. These guys are just going to take a ton of shots. Looked really good against the Hawks last time these teams faced off. Klay Thompson, you're a little less worried about blowouts with Klay Thompson just because of how the rotations shake out. So Klay Thompson's someone that you can definitely look at here. Again, Durant, more of a tournament option for me. And then as far as the big men go, we know Damian Jones is out. Obviously, Draymond Green is out. They're going to need Jonas Jerebko, Kevon Looney, and Jordan Bell all to play a decent amount of minutes. I basically have them all projected in the low 20-minute range just because Steve Kerr is very unpredictable and he just rides the hot hand with these guys. Jordan Bell, obviously the cheapest option of the three, coming in at 3,400 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. I do like him, especially on DraftKings where he's power forward eligible. I always hate punting center, but he is a viable center punt over on FanDuel as well. Should be able to attack the rim with ease against the Hawks. The Hawks really, really struggle against the roll man in the pick and roll. Jordan Bell, obviously a very violent and aggressive roll man in the pick and roll. Kevon Looney, a little bit more of a safer option. He does have a little bit more of a floor, but again, we're probably only going to get like 21, 23 minutes out of Kevon Looney. But again, at 3,700 on DraftKings, very, very appealing. It is a pretty good spot for him as well. All three of these guys, though, in play. Jonas Jerebko, if he fits your lineup, is perfectly fine. I like him a little bit more on FanDuel at 3,800 than DraftKings at 4,200. but we saw him actually go bananas against this Hawks team last time out, and it does make a little bit more sense for him because I mentioned Atlanta really, really struggling to defend the three-point line. 50% of his shots come from three. So Jonas Jerebko, a guy that, as we saw this last game, shot 57% from three against the Hawks. This is a pretty good spot for Jerebko as well. So whichever three fit your lineup is basically how I would shake it out. Looking at the Atlanta side of things, it's really tough. They are back to pretty much full health except for Alex Poitras, which means Lloyd Pierce is, again, probably going to roll out 12, 13 bodies, and that makes it relatively unappealing from a cash game standpoint, but from a tournament standpoint, a lot of these guys are interesting. We do have Trae Young coming in at 6K on DraftKings. That is a really, really solid tournament price. He's not shooting very well. Shooting just 33% from the floor over his last 10 games. On FanDuel, I have absolutely no interest at 7,200. But on DraftKings, very, very appealing at 6K. John Collins, very appealing on DraftKings at 5,300. He's a guy that I think can actually have some success against a Warriors team that does struggle to defend the rim. They're giving up 66.6% shooting at the rim. John Collins taking 68% of his shots at the rim this season. He's someone that, I have interest in on DraftKings at 5,300. Not that appealing on FanDuel at 7,100, but if you wanted to use him in tournaments, go for it. Taurean Prince, very, very, very cheap across the industry. 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. He's the guy that I think is the safest as long as he's not out there playing like absolute garbage. Has played over 30 minutes in 3 of the last 4 games. Foul trouble against the Hornets a little bit. But Taurean Prince, someone that I think is definitely interesting in the spot, actually played really well against the Warriors last time these teams faced off. You do have Kent Bazemore and Jeremy Lin revenge games. Wait, no, not Lin, just Bazemore. I saw something on Jeremy Lin earlier. I don't know. Did he play for the Warriors? I mean, maybe he did. When was that? Oh, 2010. So yeah, Jeremy Lin revenge game. I completely missed that. I completely forgot about Jeremy Lin wearing a Warriors uniform. Yeah, so Jeremy Lin revenge game. He's a little bit pricey. 5K on DraftKings, 4,700 on FanDuel. I do have some interest over on FanDuel as a value point guard option. Bembry takes 51% of his shots at the rim. Again, I mentioned Golden State really struggling to defend the rim. Bembry, a guy at 3,900, is a little bit appealing. Still not going to play a ton of minutes. You're going to get low 20s for him, but this is a spot where I think he can have some success, and he's really, really cheap across the industry. 4,500 on FanDuel, but again, 3,900 on DraftKings. Don't hate it taking a shot on him. Kevin Huerter, someone that you can also look at here. Tonight, he is a guy that has been playing pretty solid recently. Another guy that takes a lot of shots in the paint or the mid-range where Golden State is really struggling to defend. 3,700 on DraftKings. I don't hate taking a shot on him either. Moving on. I believe Cleveland at Brooklyn is the next game. Yep, Brooklyn, 6-point favorites, 212 over under. This game is kind of gross unless we get the news that we're hoping to get. Looking at the Cleveland side of things, we do have David Nwaba out. Ante Zizic is out. Sam Decker is going to be out for this game as well, I believe. And we do know George Hill is back. That does kind of mess with the minutes projections for a lot of these guys. Outside of Tristan Thompson, who I think is still just too cheap for his upside. This is an amazing spot for Tristan Thompson. Going to be a cash game and tournament court option for me tonight. Brooklyn obviously really, really bad against centers, giving up a league high 65 fantasy points per game, but they're giving up a decent amount of rebounds, 45.6, but more importantly, 15.9 second chance points per game. Tristan Thompson has just been going off recently. This is just a really, really great spot for Tristan Thompson, who's been playing a lot of minutes outside of Boston, obviously, but 19 rebounds, 12 rebounds, only had 2 against OKC, but 11, 20, 13, 15, 7, 8, 21. Dude's just pulling down so many rebounds, taking high efficiency shots, getting you putbacks. Tristan Thompson, I'm just not going to be fading him on DraftKings at 6,500. Probably not someone that I would want to fade on FanDuel at 6,700, unless you're paying up for Karl Anthony Towns, which I will get to a little bit later. Burks is still extremely appealing at 3,800 on DraftKings and 4K over on FanDuel. I do expect him to continue to play a decent amount off of the bench and kind of do a lot for this team. Double-digit field goal attempts in the first 2 games with this team can get you some rebounds. I still like Alec Burks as a perfectly fine value option in the spot. 48% of Clarkson's field goal attempts are in the mid-range, where Brooklyn is allowing 43% shooting. Of the other guards, with Sexton and George Hill and Clarkson, I still like Clarkson more than Hill and Sexton in the spot. With George Hill being in the starting lineup and Colin Sexton playing alongside of him, I think that's just going to kill his upside. They've talked about how he can play really well off the ball, so can George Hill, but I just don't see it with these two guys. Not really looking at either one, but Clarkson would be the guy that is very, very close to being cash viable if you're looking to get exposure here. Chetty Osman is fine in cash and in tournaments. Again, I like him more if he starts at the 4, but I don't see that being the case. It might happen. It might happen tonight. We'll see. Just going to play a lot of minutes, and that's pretty much it with Osman. He's just going to play a lot of minutes. And then Larry Nance in tournaments is perfectly fine. Looking at the Brooklyn side of things, kind of need to wait on Joe Harris because that would change things a lot for me in the spot. We do have Russell coming in a little over 7K over on DraftKings. He is 7,700 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel. We know he's going to just take a ton of usage. Over the last 10 games, Russell 30% usage rate. Dinwiddie 23.9%, and third on the team is Shabazz Napier at 21.5%. Russell averaging 18.6 points on 40% shooting, 18.8 field goal attempts per game. Dinwiddie more efficient, 17.9 points, 44.9% field goal shooting on 12.7 attempts per game. Over the last 2 games, while starting, Spencer Dinwiddie is averaging just 11.5 points on 34.8% shooting, compared to 16 points on 47.2% shooting the time in the 22 games he was coming off the bench. I still really like him in cash as a great option, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. Still in play regardless of Joe Harris. I think if Joe Harris is out, we'll see 30-plus minutes of Spencer Dinwiddie. If Joe Harris plays, we'll see like 28 minutes of Spencer Dinwiddie. I do like Dinwiddie a significant amount in cash and tournaments tonight. D'Angelo Russell against Washington, just 8 points on 3 of 8 shooting, but over his previous 3 games had hoisted 80 shots. Over 3 games, he had taken 80 freaking shots. That is a ton of shots. Like D'Angelo Russell, excellent tournament option, even though Cleveland not completely terrible or inept against point guards on the season. Jared Allen is definitely interesting. This is a spot where we could see him have some success. We like to take him against more stationary big men. Cleveland is allowing 1.35 points per possession to the roll man. Jared Allen rolling to the rim about 40% of the time. I do like him in tournaments. There's just so many other centers that I'm going to be building around. It's going to be hard for me to get Jarrett Allen. But at 5,500, that's really appealing in tournaments on DraftKings if you're going to be fading Tristan Thompson. And DeMarre Carroll and Allen Crabbe are intriguing GPP plays, especially if Joe Harris is out. Cleveland does struggle against corner threes. They're allowing opponents to shoot 43.1% on corner threes. Looking at it, Allen Crabbe, 13% of his shots are corner threes. 15% of DeMarre Carroll's shots are corner threes. 2 guys that we can definitely look at if Joe Harris is out. And then Shabazz Napier would be a guy to consider as another value play if Joe Harris sits. He's been really solid in the 2 games that Joe Harris has missed. Playing over 20 minutes in both, double-digit field goal attempts in both. So Shabazz Napier, someone to consider in the spot, assuming Joe Harris is ruled out. Moving on, Washington at New York Knicks. I love this game. A lot to talk about here. Washington 1 point favorites, 228 over under. Jeff Green is out. Lance Thomas, Trey Burke, or Jeff Green is questionable. Lance Thomas, Trey Burke, and Otto Porter all out for this game. Looking at the Washington side of things first, a lot of usage. Well, not a ton of usage, but a lot of minutes and things like that open up. John Wall with Otto Porter and Dwight off the floor, 32.8% usage rate, 1.28 fantasy points per minute. Bradley Beal with those guys off the floor, 29.2% usage rate, 1.10 fantasy points per minute. Then we get Kelly Oubre just under a fantasy point per minute. Markieff Morris just under a fantasy point per minute. A lot of these guys going to be looking really, really good in this spot. I love John Wall coming in at 9,300 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. Going to be a guy I'm going to be trying to get. Like, my 4 core plays are going to be Wall, Curry, Thompson, and Towns, and I'm going to be trying to make it work. Hopefully I can do it. I haven't tried to build a lineup with those 2 guys, but I absolutely love John Wall in this spot. It's just a really, really, really good spot. Knicks giving up, almost 115 points per game. They rank 19th in defensive efficiency to point guards. A whopping 78% of Wall's field goal attempts come either at the rim, in the paint, or on above the break threes. Knicks allowing opponents to shoot 65% at the rim, 41.1% in the paint, and 38% on above the break threes. Wall, love him in the spot. I do like Bradley Beal. Obviously does see a boost with, the Knicks defensive issues that I've already talked about. Kelly Oubre, a perfectly fine value option in all formats. Not someone that I think I'm going to have, especially if he's in that starting lineup where he does take a little bit of a hit, but he's fine. If he's going to be popular, I'm definitely going to be fading because Kelly Oubre chalk never works. Green would probably start again if he actually plays. Jeff Green at 3,800 on DraftKings, 4,100 on FanDuel would be a great value option. This is a spot where Knicks really, really struggle. Again, to defend the rim against power forwards, this is a really, really, really good spot for Jeff Green. 42% of his shots come at the rim, 22% on above their break threes. I already mentioned with John Wall, those are 2 spots where the Knicks are getting absolutely torched. Thomas Bryant is perfectly fine as a value punt option on DraftKings and FanDuel in tournaments. Not someone that I'm going to be looking at, but Thomas Bryant had a good game against the Sixers. Still not playing a ton of minutes, and that's pretty concerning. I would like my punt options to be playing more than 20 minutes per game, which he just is not. Markieff Morris averaging 15.6 points in 7 games as a reserve compared to 9.7 in his 15 starts. Markieff Morris coming in at 5,900 and 6,600 on FanDuel. Very appealing here. Love Markieff Morris, pretty much all formats. Going to play a lot of minutes, put up a ton of shots, get you some rebounding upside. Markieff Morris, absolutely love him in this spot. I do like that DraftKings gave him power forward and center eligibility. Pretty awesome there. And then Tomas Satoransky, Austin Rivers, guys that you can look at. Both would get minutes boosts, especially if Jeff Green was out. I don't like Satoransky in the starting lineup. I prefer Rivers if he comes off the bench, which he will. I prefer Rivers over Satoransky if Satoransky is in the starting lineup. Looking at the Knicks side of things, we love attacking Washington because, well, they're really, really bad on defense. They have won 7 of the last 9 games, but they're still absolutely putrid on defense, giving up 117.1 points per game. Trey Burke has already been ruled out for this game. It's one less guard for Fizdale to screw us over with. Unfortunately, with Courtney Lee being back, maybe playing in this game, that might change things a little bit, but Lee's not going to play a lot of minutes, so I don't think that really matters. In the last game against the Bucks, we did see Moutier play right around 30 minutes in regulation, so that was really appealing. Dotson saw 33 minutes. Trier was the odd man out at 17. We're going to continue to get the hot hand approach with these guards, whether it's Moutier or Trier. I think Moutier is perfectly fine in cash and tournaments across the industry. 5K on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. This is a really, really, really good spot for him. Washington ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're allowing 29.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, 10.3 assists, 46% shooting, and 40% from three. 28% of Moutier's field goal attempts are above the break threes, where opponents are shooting 38% against the Wizards. They're also allowing 63.5% shooting at the rim, where he takes 40% of the shots. All of this lines up for Moutier to be a fantastic option. He's going to be popular, which is why I think he's finding cash. If you're wanting to pivot in tournaments and hope that Moutier struggles and Trier is the guy that actually gets the run and has a really solid game, that's a perfectly fine tournament play there, especially on FanDuel at 3,900 where you can drop his score if he sucks. I do like making that pivot, especially in tournaments. Dotson been playing really, really well over his last couple of games. The last 3 games, honestly, he's been playing pretty well. Over 30 fantasy points in back-to-back games, 17, 16, and 21 real points. He's fine in tournaments, 4,500 on DraftKings. I do like that price. 4,200 on FanDuel. I do like that price. Definitely a good spot here for Dotson. He's perfectly fine again in tournaments. Tim Hardaway Jr. Is pretty damn close to cash safe, and that's really, really scary to say, but without Trey Burke on the floor in 515 minutes, 31.9% usage rate, 1.05 fantasy points per minute is an excellent matchup for Tim Hardaway Jr. I'm perfectly fine with him in all formats here. Someone that I will probably be trying to get a decent amount of exposure to. Unfortunately, again, he's a guy you need him to hit his shots, but against Washington, pretty good chance he's going to hit his shots. Didn't play very well against him last time, only 2 of 10 from the floor, only played 24 minutes, but still someone that you know is going to take a lot of shots. Noah Vonleh has been plagued by foul trouble recently. That's really concerning, but there's not really anyone highly active big man for him to struggle against. Noah Vonleh coming in, pretty appealing price tag here on DraftKings at 5,300, 5,500 on FanDuel. I do like Noah Vonleh a significant amount here. Still put up really solid numbers against the Bucks. Down game against Philly, but struggled against Detroit, Memphis. Again, foul trouble in some of those games. But don't overlook the fact that he does have monster upside. We saw it in those 3 games in that stretch against New Orleans, Boston, and Portland. So he's someone to definitely consider here. I'm hoping he doesn't run into the 4 fouls in 10 minutes like he did against Washington last time. Cantor is perfectly fine in tournaments, should absolutely feast on a Washington team that is really, really bad on the boards. Enes Kanter playing decent minutes, 27 minutes, 26 minutes, not great. But, we did see that stretch where he had 40, 36, 41, played 24 against his team last time, 34 fantasy points. I'm fine with that in tournaments. Mitchell Robinson is a tournament value that you can consider. And then Kevin Knox, I didn't have him in my notes, but it is worth noting. Kevin Knox looked really good against the Bucks. Played a lot of minutes. He's playing decent minutes the last couple of games. He's a guy, he needs confidence and he needs to get going. I think he's perfectly fine as a punt option on both sides. With Trey Burke off the floor, it's a 200-minute sample size. 26.7% usage rate. That's really high. That's tough to overlook. Only 0.81 fantasy points per minute, but I like some Kevin Knox exposure here against a Washington team that is just really, really bad on defense, lacks rim protection. Looking at his shot profile, 29% of his shots come at the rim, 28% of his shots are on above the break threes. So Kevin Knox, someone that I think could have some success in this spot, and I am willing to take a shot on him tonight. Moving on, Denver, Toronto, not going to spend too long on this game because it's not that appealing. Let's see, we have Toronto 6-point favorites in this game, 219.5 over under. Kyle Lowry is listed as questionable, but I expect him to play. I think a lot of that was just they didn't need him against the Cavaliers, so they made up his back injury. He's not actually injured. Looking at the Denver side of things, Gary Harris is really cheap on DraftKings. I am perfectly fine with him in cash on DraftKings at 5,100. Still fading on FanDuel at 6,400. Not really looking at a whole lot else on this Denver side. Toronto is allowing 15.9 rebounds per game to opposing big men, along with 20.3 points. Nikola Jokic is not going to continue to struggle, and his price is really, really, really freaking low. 8,200 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. He is a great tournament option if you're fading Towns and some of the other center options. Toronto does struggle against the pick and roll and in transition, which is a pretty big boost to Monte Morris. He comes in at 3,800 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel. Monte Morris, a guy, continues to play a decent amount of minutes, continues to take a decent amount of shots, scored in single digits 3 games prior to his last one against Portland, but played really well against Portland. I'm still okay taking some tournament shots on Monte Morris and hoping he has a big game. Outside of that, Paul Millsap is fine in cash. Not a great matchup, but back-to-back games of 40-plus fantasy points and double-digit rebounds. It's priced up a little bit, but it's still a fine spot for Paul Millsap in cash. Jamal Murray you can roll out in tournaments, but just not a very appealing spot here. Looking at the Toronto side of things, also not a very appealing spot. I will say Kawhi Leonard is perfectly fine in cash. You do feel pretty comfortable that he's going to get you 40-plus fantasy points, but at 9,700 on DraftKings and 10-4 on FanDuel, that's really tough to stomach in a very, very bad matchup. I would almost rather go with Paul George if you're trying to pay up at small forward, especially on FanDuel tonight. Like I said, I do expect Kyle Lowry to suit up, but if he doesn't, Kawhi Leonard does get a little bit of a boost, not a usage booster or a whole lot like that, but just it raises his floor, it makes his floor a little bit more secure. Fred VanVleet would play a bunch of minutes, eclipsed 30 minutes in the last game. He would be someone that I would definitely look at. Shot 48.8% from the floor in his starts last game, contributed 15 points and 4 assists in 33 minutes. I think Jonas Valanciunas gets the start. That makes him appealing in tournaments at 4,400 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. Not the greatest of matchups, but like I said, I do expect him. I think he gets the start here. He's fine in tournaments. Pascal Siakam averaging 18 points on 71.4% shooting over the last 4 games. Again, fine in tournaments, but he's really expensive at 6K and 6,800. Danny Green has been shooting the lights out, 10 of 19 from 3 over the past 3 games. He's fine in tournaments. Again, this is not an appealing game. Everyone's going to be guys that I just don't have a lot of interest in outside of just a spattering in tournaments. There's just not a reason to really target this game too much because these two teams, really, really good defenses. Denver, 103.8 defensive rating. Toronto, 106.4 defensive rating. It's just not a great spot to target tonight. So let's move on to a better spot to target, Houston at Minnesota. This game, very appealing on both sides. Houston 1.5 point favorites, 221.5 over under. Looking at the Houston side of things, the Rockets trying to make it 3 wins in a row. Prior to that, they were on a 4-game slide where they allowed 124 points per game, but they did hold the Spurs and Bulls to 105 points each. It's not really saying much because it's the Bulls and it's the Spurs, but with Chris Paul being back, that obviously helps their defense. Chris Paul back for a couple games already and has notched a double-double in back-to-back games. James Harden averaging 35.4 points over his last 7 games, but has only averaged 29 minutes in the last 2 because the Rockets have been blowing people out. James Harden should be pretty well rested, which is appealing. Clint Capella has recorded a double-double in 8 of the last 9 games. This is a pretty appealing spot for Clint Capella, and I'll get to that first. We do know that Karl-Anthony Towns sucks at defense. The Minnesota Timberwolves bad against centers. Ranked 20th in defensive efficiency, 2 centers, allowing 22.9 points, 14.7 rebounds per game. Capella, again, I mentioned double-double in 8 of the last 9, 3 of the last 4. Great spot here for Clint Capella if you're fading some of the other center options. He's 8,600 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel. Clint Capella has been pretty darn good of late. That one bad game against Dallas, if you want to call it that, still had 35 fantasy points, but some really, really solid games recently, and then a stretch where he had just monster upside in those 2 Detroit games and that Kings game. The rest of this game, James Harden's fine. Prices come down a little bit, especially on DraftKings, where he's dropped like 800 since last game. Leads the league in usage at 36.2%. I do like James Harden. Matchup's not great for him, but this is a spot where, like James Harden, if you're paying up and you're not going to go with Russell Westbrook or Kevin Durant, James Harden, a very, very, very good option here. Minnesota does struggle against the pick and roll. He is operating as the pick and roll ball handler about 30% of the time. I do expect Tibbs to try to stick Covington on him, and Covington has been a really, really solid guard defender because of his size the entire season, so that does concern me a little bit. And if he does do that, I think that's going to open things up for Chris Paul. It's going to open things up for PJ Tucker, Capella, James Ennis, Eric Gordon, some of these other guys. All these guys come in as guys that you can definitely look at. Chris Paul notched 40-plus fantasy points in his first 2 games back. Double-digit assists in back-to-back games, double-digit field goal attempts in 4 straight. He's perfectly fine in tournaments. He is 8K on DraftKings, 8,200 on FanDuel. PJ Tucker, a very, very appealing tournament or value option here. He's generally consistent in getting you 20-plus fantasy points. There's going to be some games where he gets you under, where he doesn't shoot very well. But generally speaking, he's going to be a guy that you can get some exposure to. Minnesota allowing 40.2% on corner threes. PJ Tucker, 50% of his shots are corner threes. James Ennis, another name to keep an eye on, 3,900 on FanDuel, 3,700 on DraftKings. I mentioned potentially Covington forcing some of the offense to funnel to some of these other shot makers. And we've seen Minnesota just get torched by small forwards recently. Gordon Hayward lit them up. And it's because they're using some of these smaller guys, the Teagues and the Roses and the Wiggins, on these small forwards, because Covington is shifting over to be like a primary on-ball defender for the point guard. Again, Minnesota allowing 40.2% on corner threes. James Ennis, 22% of his field goal attempts are corner threes. James Ennis, not a guy with monster upside, but he is going to be he's going to take a decent amount of shots, can get you some of those other defensive stats. Has scored in double figures in 3 of the last 4. I am fine with James Ennis as a tournament option, especially on some of the like the turbo slates where you need value. He can even be used in cash there. Looking at the Houston or the Minnesota side of things, I don't have a lot of analysis for why Cat is a great play outside of here are his fantasy point totals excluding playoffs against Houston over the last 3 seasons. 69.5, 59.5, 73, 63.8, 62.5, 64.5, 41.8, 48. I'm just going to leave it at that. Karl-Anthony Towns versus Houston is a thing. I've never seen any explanation as to why. Obviously, it is a decent matchup for him. Maybe he hates Houston. I don't know. I've never, like I said, I don't know why he just goes off against Houston, but he goes off against Houston. Karl-Anthony Towns, a core option, 9K, 9,400 on FanDuel. Yeah, Houston lacks rim protection. They're allowing 66.9% at the rim, which is a pretty big boost for Teague and Rose. Both those guys lead the team in drives. Rose taking 34% of his shots at the rim. I would lean Rose over Teague in the spot. Teague does actually project a little bit better because of minutes, but Rose going to spend less time against the starters, so that has me interested in him a little bit more. Not going to spend a whole lot less time because, the starters are playing like 36, 38 minutes, but still, Rose more interesting than Teague in the spot for me. And then Covington, perfectly fine in cash. He's just going to play a crap ton of minutes, and he's going to spend a lot of time defending a very high usage guy in James Harden. So, yeah, Covington, perfectly fine in cash tonight. Moving on, final game of the night. I expect this one to be a very, very popular game. New Orleans favored by 3, 238.5 over under both these teams on a back-to-back. Looking at the Clippers side, Montrezl Harrell been crushing it recently. Made 11 of his 15 shots in Sunday's loss. Is 28 for 39 over the last 3 games, boosting his field goal percentage to a 65.6%. That is 3rd in the league. Danilo Gallinari averaging 20.4 points in 5 games since he went 0 for 8 from the floor on November 20th, losing in a loss to Washington. A lot to like from the Clippers side of things. Pelicans 116.5 points per game allowed. Two opponents, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander taking over the starting role and hasn't really looked back. Continues to play really, really well for this team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander struggled against Dallas. Wasn't a great matchup for him. I did not like him in that spot, but two previous games, over 30 minutes in two of the last four, playing really, really well. This is an excellent matchup for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Against a Pelicans team, 63.5% shooting allowed at the rim. He's taking a lot of his shots, 42% are at the rim. I really like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this spot. Projects to be a really, really, really good play in all formats. The Pelicans ranked 28th in defensive efficiency to point guards. I think he's going to be popular because of that price tag, and I'm fine eating the chalk on that one. Avery Bradley, I still really like him. He's priced up a little bit now, 4,400 on DraftKings, 4,100 on FanDuel. More of a FanDuel punt play. But Avery Bradley, a guy, over his last few games has been playing a decent amount of minutes. 36 against Dallas, 32 against the Kings, 34 against Portland. 29 against Phoenix. That was just a monster blowout, but has been playing really well since coming back. Over 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. He's just really cheap for a guy playing a lot of minutes. It's going to be a fast-paced game. Going to be some turnover opportunities for Avery Bradley. I like him a lot in the spot, cash and tournaments for sure. 15% of his field goal attempts are corner threes, where New Orleans is allowing 44% shooting. So Avery Bradley, a guy that I want to get some exposure to as a value option here. Opponents are shooting 37% from 3 against the Pelicans. That's a pretty big boost to Gallinari, who at one point over the past couple of weeks, I think was leading the league in 3-point percentage, 46.8% from 3 on the season, taking 4, 5, 6 a night. Really, really good spot for Gallinari, who actually had a really solid game against this team last time out. Still taking a lot of shots for this team. A really, really good spot. He is an excellent spot-up shooter. Pelicans giving up 1.23 points per possession on spot-ups. Tobias Harris playing close to the basket. Tobias Harris is just really, really good at basketball, and people just don't understand how good he is. I'm perfectly fine with Tobias Harris in all formats here. Excellent spot for him as well. I love pairing Harris and Gallinari. There's not really a whole lot of negative correlation with those two guys. And then Montrezl Harrell, perfectly fine in all formats. Looking at the New Orleans side of things, cheapest way to get exposure that I really, really like in the spot, Tim Frazier continues to play really, really well in that starting lineup. Has played a ton of minutes recently, 37, 24, 38. 9 assists in back-to-back games, 9, 9, and 12. That's really appealing. I like this spot for Tim Frazier. Going to be someone that I get a decent amount of exposure to at just 4,700 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. Really, really solid option. More of a cash game play, not really a ton of tournament upside. But yeah, Holiday, the usual story with Holiday. Fine in cash, fine in tournaments, 40-plus fantasy point upside, blah, 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 blah. Excellent matchup here for Jrue Holiday. And then Anthony Davis. Clippers really struggling against post-ups. That's a big boost for Anthony Davis. Doesn't really need one, but it is a boost to Anthony Davis. He has just been insane recently. Dude's just absolutely crushing, putting up just some absolutely gaudy numbers. 30.2 points on 50.2% shooting at home this season, and that goes along with 13 rebounds and 2.7 blocks. That's just monster numbers. It's just, yeah. Against the Clippers had almost 70 fantasy points. You're playing Anthony Davis if you're wanting to pay up for someone. So, yeah. I'm fine with Mirotic, still perfectly fine. Cash and tournament option, especially on DraftKings. 7,200 is really appealing for Mirotic. Has been struggling recently, but still taking a lot of shots. The shots just haven't really been falling. Still getting a decent amount of rebounds, getting you some assists, getting you some steals, things like that. I really like Mirotic in the spot. Clippers not great against opposing wing players, so he's fine. Julius Randle, perfectly fine as a tournament option off the bench. Not really on FanDuel where he's center eligible, but on DraftKings where he is power forward eligible. Julius Randle at 6,700, pretty appealing in this spot. He should be able to have his way with that bench unit of the Clippers. But that sums it up. As I mentioned earlier, my core play is mostly going to try to be John Wall, Stephen Curry, Towns, and Tristan Thompson. Hopefully, I can make it work and still get some exposure to this Clippers and Pelicans game and other spots. But good luck in all your contests tonight. I might be back tomorrow for tomorrow's 5-game slate. We'll just have to see how this slate looks. I may take the day off from recording, but good luck again in all your contests tonight.